All right, here we go, this 4 o'clock hour. And we're having the pods, 1 through 4 in the Big 12. We use the same 4, but we switch up the dates so it doesn't kind of get stale. The timing's not the same, where it's like, da-da-da-da-da. So the pod Craig called the American pod, although BYU not a part of that, but UCF, Houston and Cincinnati. Oh, I know.
People come at you.
I know. All right, the Big 12, we start with UCF, Gus Malzahn. They have Sam Houston State, 5:30 on Saturday. That game is on ESPN+, and they open up by running all over whoever they, of course, wanted to on Saturday. KJ Jefferson, a little shaky. We discussed that yesterday, but Craig, we start with you with the Knights. Paul, then back to you on them too.
Well, I mean, they got a very convincing win and didn't have to sweat much of anything. I think the big takeaway on the negative side is obviously that first quarter, in particular, the first quarter for KJ Jefferson, where it was not good. Throwing the football was ugly, and I think he got better as the game went along. Obviously, they're going to be very good running the football. Like they're going to be very good running the football, but you have to have that other threat. Early on, they did not have that threat. They had yakety sax playing in the background, basically. And then, KJ Jefferson got better, and I think he's going to get better. I think this is a new team. It's a new year. It's a new season, and he got better, like I said, as the game progressed. So I think as more games get under his belt, he's going to be more of the guy that we saw with bright spots at Arkansas, but he's not, without his moments where there's going to be things that go wrong. So that's just the give and the take, but I don't think that's emblematic of what to expect moving forward necessarily at all. And I don't think Gus Malzahn feels that way either. But just in case, got Ja'Carry Brown there, but he's just not played a lot of football, but it was good to see him get some reps because he hasn't played a ton of football. So that's just something to monitor. Obviously coming out of the weekend is KJ Jefferson's continued development. Run game's great. They are so deep there. RJ Harvey's I guess you would call him the headliner, but he was kind of the guy in the first half. And then like Penny Boone was the guy, but Miles Montgomery, who we saw at Cincinnati previously, he had a really nice game as well. So they are super loaded there, but are they going to be able to get Kobe Hudson and those receivers more involved because of said quarterback questions? I think that's the big key for them, but they took care of their business, and I think you moved on.
By the way, before you go back, Paul, you're next, but speaking of Hudson, Micah Hudson did not play in the opening game for Tech.
You know what? That's going to be a really interesting annoyance for Joey McGuire, is that he's so high profile that when he doesn't play, his very first, hey, where's Micah Hudson at? Like that was one of the press conference questions, and he explained it, but I do think that's kind of the annoyance of having a guy that caliber is like, where is he? Why is he not playing right away? It's like he's a true freshman.
His profile keeps going up. Of the 4 athletes that Patrick Mahomes picked, to roll it out, he was the football one.
When you promote that you got one of these,
I know.
Then you're going to have to take that. Paul, UCF this week, Sam Houston State.
I think they should be fine. Although Sam Houston played well. I think that, like Craig, I think KJ Jefferson will get better. He's got a really good quarterback coach coaching him at Gus Malzahn. Their running game is really deep. Let's see how much better their defense is. It's hard to tell. But my opinion hasn't changed much. Although, KJ, I wish for UCF fans to not have to suffer for what I'm going through right now. But so I hope that he's as good as I thought he was going to be there, because I thought it would work out.
And all of a sudden your quarterback evaluations are like,
they're on the DJU.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know. Look, I never thought DJU was going to wreck the world. I just, and I thought KJ would fit in that system well. I thought it was better for him, and it probably still is. But he didn't start off well last week when you thought maybe he would have. But give it time. I think at least he completed some passes, and they won the game.
Who would you rather have, KJ or DJ?
KJ.
Okay.
Let's say KJ.
Yeah, I guess.
I'd rather have herpes at this point than DJU.
You'd rather have herpes?
Dude, that doesn't go away unless they've created something scientifically the last few years that I'm unaware of. But
look,
at least TJ will graduate at some point and move on. Like herpes stays around forever.
Good point. So, but it's just, he's been that bad. He can't throw the ball past 7 yards. How are you supposed to win that way?
You could have herpes, but Florida State wins, would you?
Many people in Tallahassee do.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true.
Kim Coulter saying Micah Hudson played. He had no catches.
Yeah.
And so I should have been a little bit more specific there. But I mean, you expect him like right off the top to be able to be a part of it. All right, so they're not till the next pod, like 2 days from now. Houston, oh my God. I thought UNLV would win the game, but they dominated the game. Houston struggled. Willie Fritz, we like him. Obviously, a hell of a coach. It's going to take some time. And now, by the way, you go to Norman to play Oklahoma. And this isn't like the Greg Ward, Tom Herman type Houston playing Oklahoma. This is going to get ugly.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so when we do these, do you want to do like the look back and forward at the same time?
I'll be the dictate. I'll dictate.
I just want to know.
I'm starting off with they're playing Oklahoma. Then we'll go back to what happened to them on Saturday against UNLV.
Okay, so
what do you mean?
I'm just trying to figure which order you want me to go in.
No,
like
Oklahoma,
look back or
they're playing Oklahoma and Norman.
Okay. Well, based off what we just saw, it's not like that's why I was asking. Like, based on what we just saw going back, it's going to be really ugly on Saturday in Norman, Oklahoma. Willie Fritz and company have a lot of work to do, and there's not a bunch of life rafts on the horizon or anywhere close. They're not even inflatable. Like there's nothing arriving that's going to save them from what they already have and cure their ails right now, other than just hard work and getting better and hopefully getting better as quickly as possible. But they had a lot of issues on the O-line. And then Donovan Smith was affected by that to some extent. And then he wasn't, and he made more mistakes that compounded the issues that were starting up front. And so it was all bad. They had some things here and there, like on special teams, and like Muse, who came over from Georgia, like gave them a little flash, Mekhi Muse. So they've got like a player here and there, but they're going to be in a bad spot this year. I mean, I just think that's pretty clear. We kind of already figured that going in, but I think now that you've seen a dose, like, yeah, it's going to get better. It has to, but it's not going to be this weekend against Oklahoma. Not after what we saw in game number 1.
They had 26 yards rushing on 27 carries. Some of those were sacks of Donovan Smith, but man, that's certainly not going to, that's, you have to be able to, and they can't. Parker Jenkins had 2 carries for 17 yards. And he's their guy. Rashawn Stanford, who we covered in high school, had 4 carries for 13 yards. Chris had 16 yards. They could not run the ball. And it wasn't like, again, they were sacked so much it just like knocked it down 50, 60 yards. But Houston, Paul, at Oklahoma, who won their opening game as they expected, dominated Temple.
I think they're going to dominate Houston. I don't think Houston's deep enough. I think that you've got year 3 of Brent Venables. I think that he's finally starting to build some depth. Now, granted, he's not into the SEC schedule yet, so he probably doesn't have the SEC quality depth. But Oklahoma's biggest issue in its last couple of years in the Big 12 was, they couldn't come at you in waves anymore. Their talent had been, plucked away mostly by Lincoln Riley. And now I think they're starting to build that back up again. We'll see how it continues in the SEC, but I think that Jackson Arnold is really fun. I think he's going to be really fun to watch. I think that Deion Burks is going to be really fun to watch all year long. And I think they've got a lot of weapons there on offense that are going to be tough, and they're starting to play defense like Brent Venables wants them to. So I think most positive things for Oklahoma this year, the only thing that's going to get them is that they're in the SEC and it's a bear of a schedule.
Yeah, no, but so you win every game you can, and then you try to go and pluck off a game or two that won't be easy. It's Oklahoma. They're going to be fine.
They're going to be fun. The O-line's got to, gel and get better, but they're replacing like the entire line. So that was already to be expected. I just think in that first game, that just rattled people, even with the expectation of just like maybe being jarred by it's not far enough of like what you were expecting, even knowing it was going to take some time. So we'll see how behind schedule they really are. They'll get tested quickly, but not this week.
Yeah, and again, it's Houston at Oklahoma, 6:45 Saturday, the SEC Network. Cincinnati coming off the win. They get Corleone back on the defensive line. And Pittsburgh, 11 o'clock on ESPN2.
Yeah, I mean, that was a nice win over Towson. They left a lot of points on the board, though. I think that's something that you definitely walk away from that game. It shouldn't have been 38-20 against a team like Towson. You should have had a bit more out there, couldn't finish drives, and that was part of the issue. But the main thing you walk away from is that Brendan Sorsby's your starting quarterback, and you're pretty thrilled with what he can do. He didn't play a perfect game. you wouldn't expect him to with as little experience as he has. He's only started or played in a handful of games at this point. Came over from Indiana, Texas guy, and had a really nice debut. I think he was he not like newcomer of the week in the Big 12, I think?
Who?
Sorsby,
yep.
So, just build off of what he showed you. And I think you got some talent there on offense, but just left some points out there, and we'll see Sorsby kind of as he continues to progress. But I thought that was a nice start for Cincinnati. Now, as far as, do you want me to talk about this week as well? With that?
Yeah.
Okay. I think this is a really big game. Like if you look at the overall schedule for the Big 12 this weekend, there is a lot of ACC matchups. I think there's a couple, or at least one Big 10 matchup. There's a bunch of power matchups in the Big 12. Like half the league's playing power matchups, it feels like, from what I was looking over earlier. So this game with Pittsburgh, the whole ACC trash talk, baby.
Yeah.
Lord knows there's nothing going on between those two conferences to warrant any trash talk. But I think Pittsburgh, with what they showed last week against Kent State, they brought over Holstein from Alabama, former highly rated recruit. He had a pretty nice debut, threw for a bunch of yards, and had a really nice day. So he's going to be, I think, somebody you obviously have to factor in that duel between Sorsby and Holstein. Will probably was he at Alabama, or was it Texas A&M? Now that I'm thinking about
GCU. Eli Holstein?
Holstein?
I thought he was
at Pitt, and then he was
maybe
Alabama.
It's a transfer error. Maybe he was at all of those places.
He was at Bama. He was just at Bama.
Okay, he's at Bama. Like, I just forget. Maybe he was at all these places though.
No,
But,
he was just at Bama.
Okay.
You guys are confusing the hell.
He committed to A&M and then decommitted.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking of. Then I'm thinking of the commitment. But yeah, he had a really nice game, and I don't know much else about what to expect out of Pitt. So this ought to be informative when it comes to the Cincinnati side of things and how they stack up with a much better team than they saw last week.
Yeah, you can't really judge on Towson other than they did a good job. The Brennan Sorsby looked good, won the newcomer of the week. As far as Pitt goes, this is the first real test for both of them, and curious to see Eli Holstein and what he does against a Cincinnati team. He'll be better than the team he played last week. Dante Corleone is back.
I just crack up. That name always makes me just think about the mafia.
It should, because I think that's what they were going for.
There's a really weird coincidence or something.
Yeah, I mean, they're really fans of the most famous mafia movie.
Yeah.
I think Cincinnati Pittsburgh will be very interesting, like Craig, because we don't really know anything about them yet, and they're both coming off of rough years. So this is your first chance to make sure it's really not a rough year now that you're playing another FBS opponent.
And as it stands, it looks like it's 2-point spread in favor of Cincy. They're at home, so you wonder if that factors in at all. But this is expected to be a tight game, and I just don't feel like I know either team well enough to have a great feel for how this game will go. You know what I mean? So this will be one where I just kick back and see what the result looks like and then figure out how it unfolded that way. But ESPN has Pitt, despite being the 2-point dogs for betting purposes, they have them actually, according to their analytics, as like a 56-44 type of a favorite here, Pitt on the road. So yeah, this ought to be a pretty close game. And if not, then obviously that'll be a story in its own right.
All right. So just glancing at you mentioned some of the teams they're going to play. I don't have all of them. There's the ACC game with Pitt and SMU, the Big 10 game, Nebraska, Illinois, SEC, Arkansas and Oklahoma.
No. Arkansas's at Oklahoma State.
You're not listening. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The games against other schools and other conferences, those are the teams that are playing.
Gotcha.
A couple of teams from the SEC, Arkansas and Oklahoma. Oklahoma State plays at Arkansas, as you said, Houston against Oklahoma. So there are in Washington State and Tech. And so there's some games where they have a chance to get, put a couple of notches in your belt. There's also a chance to have a bad weekend. Cincinnati, Pitt, we just discussed them. Houston and Oklahoma, we've discussed them. And UCF, Sam Houston State. BYU, just an hour and a half north. SMU, it's an ACC opponent. Friday night, 6 o'clock on ESPN2.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I'll mention with Gus Malzahn at UCF is he's a coach, so he's not going to not respect Sam Houston and the talent that they're going to have and what they're going to come rolling in with. I think they're going to be well prepared, UCF, for Sam. But, BYU, they looked really good in their opener. glad Jay Hill is okay. Their DC, apparently he was in the box at the game, even though it was like the day after he had a heart attack. And apparently he and Kalani Sitake talked and agreed to keep it as normal as possible and not let anybody in on it until they absolutely had to, that he had suffered a heart attack. So they handled it that way. And I guess he was up in the box on Saturday, but he'll be back to, I guess, more normal this week. And he's good. And so that's just great news for starters. But Jake Retzloff had a really nice start after beating out Gary Bohannon. I think it's pretty clear that Kalani Sitake has a great deal of respect for Gary, as we're not surprised by that whatsoever after having our own dealings with him.
Yep.
And I'd anticipate we're going to see some Gary this weekend, because SMU is going to have multiple quarterbacks playing different roles and giving different looks. And I think based on the tea leaves that you're probably going to see Gary in some type of situation this week to kind of throw a change up as well for BYU. So that'll be interesting to see that. But yeah, I think you walk away really happy about what you saw from your decision there at QB1 and what Retzloff did for you. The rest of it feels like a bit of a work in progress, but I thought overall it was a pretty good game for BYU. It was a really nice start, and just glad Jay Hill's okay. And I think this is a big opportunity, although they're not nearly the same away from home as they are at home with that raucous crowd behind them. And I think SMU is just more talented on paper. So I think this is a game where BYU is going to have to pull the upset. But I think that's possible. I mean, it's possible, but it'll be a hell of a challenge going to Dallas and playing the Ponies.
Yeah, I think SMU is going to be loaded for bear. They're going to try to. They've got something to prove, to a lot of people about being a new team that feels like they're ready to go into the Power Four. So I think SMU is going to win, but Jake Retzloff played well enough last week, so looked like it worked out, and we'll see how it moves on down for them. But nobody around BYU had high expectations anyway. Like they expect this to be a transitional period. We haven't heard anybody going, well, if this happens and this happens. Like they kind of know where they're at right now.
I know a guy that's a pain management doctor that I've gotten to know. In fact, he once injected my lower back with cortisone or a steroid. He's a huge BYU fan. He goes, we have expectations of winning about 4 or 5 games this year. And he understands where they are. He's not unrealistic. I said, are you going to the game with SMU? He goes, I don't want to be around anyone at SMU.
Hey, it's understandable if you've been around people from SMU before. Yeah.
And again, it's like nobody else.
There's some good ones, but there's just but
that surprised me. They're that close, and he's not going to go watch them play.
The frequency of SMU's D-bag to cool person ratio is a lot higher than most schools because it's such a small school. So you have more frequency as far as running into obnoxious SMU fan on the street. It's like a 1 for 2, as opposed to maybe other bigger fan bases like 1 in 5.
Who would be Baylor's about to be in Utah, but who would be next?
Florida State. No, I'm kidding. I'm sure there'd be people who say Baylor, and maybe there's 1 out of 3.
Yeah, when they were winning, and there was a lot.
But
of
SMU with this ACC attachment now has just ratcheted up. And I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying they know the perception. They'll respond with something about money, I'm sure. But I don't know what that crowd's going to look like because it is SMU. So it could be like what we were watching at Stanford the other night, or it could be raucous because
I think this will be a good crowd. Not like the FSU game.
No,
because they're
now they feel like they're probably going to win that game. More so than they did before.
Paul, can you wait for that game to come, that SMU game?
I can now.
Dude, based on what we've seen, they could blow them out.
So I finally, here's the thing. I finally get to go see them in person, and they're awful. Awful. It's been more than a decade since I've laid my own eyes on my beloved team, and they're awful.
Yeah.
It's disrespectful.
Well, I'm interested to see what that crowd, because I think before the first 2 games, you would have looked at that could have been a really massive FSU crowd, overall, 80% of the stadium. But no, I think BYU traveling, they're not the same. So I'd expect, and like I said earlier, SMU is just a better team on paper.
You think BYU is going to help fill that baby up? Because they
I don't know about fill up, but I think there's plenty of Mormons in Dallas that'll be there for
from all
support.
over the place. Yeah. By the way, so they play a Big 12 game against Utah to Baylor. There's 2 against the ACC. Pittsburgh, and then also SMU, 4 against the Big Ten, and 3 games against the SEC because Arizona State's playing Mississippi State.
Yep.
Among the Oklahoma and Arkansas games too. And then there's the the Pacific Coast Conference, the Pac-2, and then there's American, whatever. All right, Paul.